Hello.
Yeah,
What's that? You can't see anything yet?
no, I can see the screen. I can see what you're doing.
Kind of crazy that you can see what I'm doing faster than I can.
Yeah, you've got a little Quota Implementation Plan slide up there.
Yay!
So one thing I'm wondering though is if
Morning. The troops are arriving.
Well, it's nice to drive 5 minutes to the meeting.
Okay, well you can hang out. Make sure my mute is off. Okay. Oh, hi Yeti. That is Frank. Oh, good. Thank you for helping me. I appreciate that. Going into turbo meltdown. Okay. If you want to, why don't you just call me when it's all over and tell me what you were going to tell me next. Okay. Okay, I'll talk to you tomorrow. Thank you. Hey, Paul. You be good this morning? Yeah. Good morning. Yeah, we're on live, so okay. Yeah, people can hear. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good.
One call from Donald yesterday.
Yeah.
He's calling you next. Like, oh, fun.
So
I left a message for Ross this morning. I'll talk to Jim Houston. He didn't want it. He assumed secretary.
was there some
Well, Donald, I don't know if he told you. That's his screwed his hand. Well, so he's got some old tractor. It's kind of started. Something broke. Shattered his surgery. Get it all fixed back up. That means it was fine. So he was out of the office for 2 days. Time on this, and the decision was made. He said Kevin Masahara, that's what he heard, made a decision to act under Secretary Houston, and that's all he decided not to release the name. He's not even going to give a number. Status. Hey, Paul.
Yeah.
Crazy busy, a lot of people showed up.
Sure. Well, let scofflaws like us show up, you know.
Joey there, we didn't get a chance to talk much about it. Yeah, it was really busy. It was like, they said it was 800 attendees. It was very fairly large, so we're talking about CFJs decided not to release.
I'm not calling any final decision. You won't say? I don't think so, considering I've got a couple of members who come back and say they haven't gotten this. I think we'll figure out how to go with this. I mean, I was somewhat lenient on the fact that we were having guys coming that said they didn't do the ballot because I thought, well, they're going to release a list of names and be able to go through and check with them. Hey, you haven't voted. Did you get a ballot? But now we're not going to do this. Now,
So you say this, or?
yeah. He said, I got to eat some crow. I told you all. In fact, he listened in on the webcast on our last meeting, and he said, I have one comment for you, Rob, and that is that there was some chatter as to who would be releasing the names of those who hadn't voted and when requested, and he said, technically, we will release the names of those who have voted. So it's just a technicality. I said, oh, that was my assumption that we got this. We always do. We'd have to cross-reference our list to see who hadn't voted, but that's fine. So he said
going to be a list.
They're still got to, so you'll be able to figure out who didn't vote.
No. That was then. As of yesterday, they have decided they're not releasing a list. They're not releasing a number. Now, Houston says the precedent is that this is not. They had a beef council vote a couple years ago to raise the fee, and they worked with the beef council to update them on the status. So this is very unusual. Kevin Masahara is now acting chief. I don't know if he's got a program to start against the dairy industry. I was never particularly impressed by his attitude towards the dairy industry and his wigs. And if legal says, oh, we think there's no problem with releasing these names, he's not one that will steamroll. We'll see what the secretary says. Because this one kind of pisses me off.
Has anybody called the secretary?
I left a message for this morning.
She just texted me and said she'd get back to me, so she could not tell me she had.
You left her the essence of the question.
Oh, yeah. No, I don't know. Yeah, it's a lot. It's coming into notice. So Amy. He had
It's just like meetings, because he came to ours too. He could have told him, you get the same presentation, actually.
Right, well, but I did tell him that he was working to be more.
Kind of disappointed, I obviously didn't convince him to go yet, so hopefully he closes the deal.
He wants to go to another meeting.
He comes a long ways too.
Yeah.
He's trying to, use his
Oh, yeah.
So do you want me, today we're just gonna have to advance the slides, YouTube live is not. If God should know us listening.
Hey, Don.
Hi, TDFA. I know you're listening.
I have this for advancing slides. Carry this around.
That's your power connector, huh? Okay, so it's just like the one we have. Okay. Just give me a second. You might have to actually like physically get up in front of it. I tried the fork too. I swear, I tested it a second ago. Okay, now I really do.
All right, let's see here. Perfect.
I'm not hearing people like you can't be sure it's pretty good. But it's pretty out there.
Walking distance. Yeah. Yeah.
Makes sense.
Oh, yeah.
Hello. Can you hear me, Annie, now? Hello, hello. Okay. We're talking. Hello, hello. People are watching. I see that. That's exciting. Oh. Mute microphone. Check, check. Okay. Hello. Says it's live. We call invite people. 11 viewers. Okay. Okay, thanks. I think we're, okay, perfect. Get ready to start?
Yeah.
Okay, 12 viewers participating with bated breath. Like they've been on for a while, they're hanging out. So Oh yeah, they heard most of what we were talking about, yeah. Sorry, for those of you on the live hangout, we're about to start. Appreciate the patience. A lot of exciting things to talk about in the dairy industry before an actual meeting starts.
All right.
Okay, well, this is the final joint meeting of the trade groups and the cooperatives to talk about the Quota Implementation Plan. We appreciate those of you coming out today. I see that most of us here in the room know each other for the purpose of the live presentation. Keep in mind, everyone, that this is a YouTube live feed, so everything that we talk about today is being heard by an unknown source of number of listeners, and it will be recorded and posted on the YouTube channel for posterity until we decide to delete it. So there should be no need to do that for some time. My name is Anya Radava. I'm the CEO of Western United Dairymen. I want to thank everyone for coming today. I see some representatives here from the CDI, DFA, Land O'Lakes, California Dairy Campaign, Milk Producers Council, and Western United Dairymen. Rob Vandenhubel with California Dairies Inc. is going to be leading us through. Sorry,
Good job, Rob.
Table just fell down. Fortunately, no one was injured. I feel like I'm narrating my last breath here. But we will go ahead and begin, and Rob has a clicker, and so those of you on the YouTube live feed should be seeing a title screen that says Quota Implementation Plan. With that, Rob, are you officially shaken and ready?
All right. Well, hey, good morning. Appreciate y'all coming out, and really appreciate all the work that Anya and Western did in coordinating these meetings, and then all of our partners, the co-ops and trade associations, and working jointly on this. This is the last of a couple of joint meetings. All the organizations have been meeting and communicating with their own memberships about what's going on with the federal order and the Quota Implementation Plan. But we thought it was valuable to have a couple of these meetings to talk with a joint voice about the issue, even as all 6 organizations really are united when it comes to this issue of the Quota Implementation Plan. So first off, why we're here? We're here because we're on the verge of some decision points on the federal order, and specifically on quota. The final language on the federal order, this is the broader language, how a California federal order would actually operate, is expected by year end, and we should see that final language in an expected vote sometime next year. Actually had the opportunity to talk to USDA in this past week, and while they couldn't say anything related officially to what the decision will be or what the language would be, they kind of laid out potential timelines, given different scenarios, and we're still very much in line with this potential timeline, assuming that the process continues to move forward as planned. If we move towards a federal order in California, we got a fundamental math problem. We got a $12 million a month obligation to the holders of quota in California. Quota is a historic program, goes back to the start of pooling in California. The cost of $12 million is currently taken out of the California pool. The pool every month is gathered, class 1, 2, 3, 4A, and 4B milk prices and volumes go into that revenue pool, and the first $12 million fund this quota program. If we go into a federal order, there will no longer be a California pool, it will be a federal order pool, and it will look slightly different. There will be different milk volumes in there. There would be some out-of-state milk that's not currently in the current California state order. There'd also be in-state milk that is in the California state order that may not be in a federal order. And so because of that, we're not able to continue funding the program, the quota program, with pooled revenues. So this problem, this $12 million a month funding problem, was put before this group of dairy farmers starting in May. And these 15 producers were appointed by the secretary. You'll look through that list and probably see familiar names from Northern California to Southern, quota holders, non-quota holders, co-op members, non-co-op members, a couple of organic shippers, a couple of fluid bottlers, producer handlers, a couple of cheese makers who also have dairies as well. And so these 15 producers met 4 times in May and September and discussed all the issues. We actually have one of those members, you'll see here in the 2, Joey and Case. So they put in quite a bit of time and effort in understanding all the issues around quota and federal order and challenges and what possible changes needed to occur.
We may have to stay out of presenter mode, just like we did last time.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
No worries. So after 4 meetings, the Producer Review Board approved a set of comprehensive priorities and policies on how to structure a quota implementation plan, a quota plan, absent that California pool, how to fund that $12 million a month. CDFA took those policies or those priorities, put them into the official language that you'll see in what you got in the mailbox, the envelope about a month ago that you got, that's due back by December 4. And right now, between now and December 4, that vote is being held on whether you support it or not. You can certainly read through that document. It's about 12 pages, I think, of really legalese type sounding provisions. What I'm going to present here is a bolded summary of what is in there. And then the only other thing in that envelope is a letter saying get it in by December 4. All right, so what's in that proposal? First, with regard to quota ownership, you on the farm, if you own quota, really the program remains the same. The premium would be the same. The regional quota adjusters we're familiar with remain the same. You have to be a grade A shipper delivering to a California plant. That's the same as today. Purchases and sales are managed by CDFA. There's a 24-month restriction. Once you buy, you can't sell for 24 months and vice versa to eliminate short-term trading of quota. Also, hardship request opportunities with the Producer Review Board, just as occurs today. And you've got to be an active shipper. So every 60 days, at least, you've got to be producing grade A milk in order to be eligible to hold, own, and be paid on quota. Where things start to look different is the funding side. Like I said, $12 million a month used to come out of the pool. Under this program, if we go into a federal order, and that's important to note, it only goes in if we ultimately, the producers vote and support a federal order in California. All grade A milk produced and processed in California would be subject to an assessment. Given the current production, this assessment would be somewhere in the range of 36 to 38 cents a hundred. Now, that's a big number, one of the largest deductions on your check. But it's important to note that that math is fundamentally the same as the math that occurs today. The only difference is how it shows up on your milk check. And I'll come back to this slide, but let me explain what I mean by that. So there's really two paths here. The path option one is how we do it today. We call that behind the curtain. All the math happens before you even see the number. So you see the over-base milk price in this example be $16. When you see an over-base milk price, it's already had the $12 million of quota money taken out of it. And so that quota has been funded before you ever saw the $16. So there's no need for a quota assessment. Your net milk price is $16, and if you own quota, you get paid anywhere from $1.43 to $1.70 on top of that over-base milk price, RQA. What's being talked about here in the Quota Implementation Plan is the same math, but with more transparency. Now, the in front of the curtain, we'll call it, your blend price is going to be announced before there's any money taken out for quota, because they're not going to take, they can't take that $12 million out of the pool anymore. This example, same math as before, $16.38 though would be your blend price instead of the after quota calculation of $16. So $16.38, you'll see a quota assessment of 38 cents. Your net milk price would be $16, and then plus the quota premium of $1.43 to $1.70, depending on RQAs. So I don't know if anybody's got any questions on this, but it's to demonstrate the math is the same. You may not even have realized that that there's a quota adjustment to your milk price before you ever see an over-base price. There is, and there wouldn't be in federal order, which is why you do that quota assessment. 6 to 38 cents a hundredweight. Why is there a range? The range is really because the $12 million is largely static, but the amount of milk that cost gets spread out over changes from month to month. It changes from year to year as we trend. And so this is an example just within the same year, April 2017, the spring flush, to August 2017, what is that, 4 months later, the peak of summer. The quota premium in April was $11.4 million. The quota premium in August was $11.8 million. The only difference there is that there's an extra day in August. So the quota program costs about $400,000 a day to pay out quota holders, which comes out to about $12 million a month.
The total milk, though, is quite a bit different. In April, we had grade A milk in California of 3.3 billion plus pounds. That $11.4 million cost over the 3.3 billion pounds of milk, you get 34 cents a hundredweight and change. In August, you've got 11.8 million pounds, but it's spread over a much smaller quantity of milk, only 3.1 billion pounds of milk. So about 200 million pounds of milk less. And so you can see the cost went up from 34 cents in April to 37.5 cents in the summer, in August. So that's why there's not going to be a static number necessarily all the time in the program. It's going to flex depending on what the milk production is. And I just showed spring to summer. There's also longer term trends. We obviously are producing less milk in 2017 than we did in 2014. So as those trends move up and down, you'll see these numbers. CDFA at the end of the day is only going to collect what they need to fund the program. They're going to start, what you're going to see in your mailer, it's going to start at 38 cents because they had to pick a number and they didn't know, are we going to start this program in the fall, in the summer, when are we going to start this? They picked a high number. But it'll be adjusted so that all they're collecting is what they actually have to pay out, plus 0.2 or 0.3 cents for administrative. Yeah.
Can you explain what happens when 38 cents is run down?
Well, 38 cents is only month one. So will it be enough in month one? CDFA believes it will. After that, there is no limits. It will go as high or as low as it needs to go to fund the quota program. But that month one, theoretically, I guess what you're saying is it could not be enough. There is about I believe they've talked about $4 to $5 million in the current pooling plan in CDFA. Right now, they collect assessments to fund the pooling program at CDFA, and there's some leftover funds because they always left about 6 months reserve, and those funds would be available to provide that balance going into a federal order, because obviously if we're not running CDFA anymore as a pool, they don't need that $5 million. So that would be converted over and potentially fill that gap if 38 cents isn't enough, but also could be help to smooth out, the first year of the program. They haven't made that decision. It's producer money. I mean, it's not that they just put it in the pockets, but it's available for that kind of blending. All right, so I talked about the first one. Grade A milk is assessed. I talked about the second one, 36 to 38 cents. I talked about the third one, and that's 38 cents is going to be the first month. That's what you're going to see in the paperwork. But it's not going to be frozen in time. It's going to depend on how much milk. The last thing on this slide is there's two pools of milk that were discussed quite a bit at the Producer Review Board. That's grade B milk that's produced in California, as well as grade A milk that is produced in California but sold outside of California. So trucked over state line in raw form and processed outside of the state of California. Neither of those two pools of milk, grade B or grade A milk that's sent out of the state, currently participate in the quota program. There's legal reasons why. Grade B milk doesn't participate because obviously grade B that milk has not been funding the quota program. Quota program is funded out of pooled revenues. Grade B is not part of the pool. Therefore, grade B has a legal restriction that they cannot participate in the quota program. Grade A milk that's produced in California and sold outside of the state gets into interstate commerce. And so the federal government regulates interstate commerce, but the state of California doesn't have the authority, and this has been tested in court in the past, doesn't have the authority to go require that milk that goes out of the state participate in a state-run and overseen program. And so while the Producer Review Board was very interested in having as much milk as possible be participating in this quota program, they, for legal reasons, were not able to include these two particular groups of milk, grade B and grade A milk sold out of state. That doesn't mean that they were turning a blind eye to this grade B milk or this grade A milk sold out of state. They'd like to look at any opportunity going forward on how they might be part of the quota program, particularly on grade B, because that milk is processed in the state of California. But for the purposes of this vote, that wasn't able to be structured in a way, and because it would take legislative change. It would actually take the legislature in Sacramento making a change to the law. That couldn't happen prior to doing all this. And so what you're voting on is largely the way the program works today. The only difference is how the numbers show up on the milk state. That Yeah.
Do you anticipate those two pools of milk just talking about to grow?
Well, I think grade A milk produced, I'll start with that one. Grade A milk produced in California and sold out of the state. It's going to be, it's going to be dependent on the future of our milk supply. If there is a local home for milk, it's going to be a whole lot more efficient and cheaper from a transportation basis to produce that, or process that milk locally. So given where our state is today and where I see it going in the near term, I don't see so much surplus milk that you'd see massive amounts of grade A milk moving out of the state. So I don't see that growth unless something totally changed about our supply-demand relationship here in California. On grade B, I don't know if it will grow. There's other factors. One of the reasons you would go grade B voluntarily as a producer, which is only an option on January 1st and you're locked in for the whole year, is you think that the manufacturing milk price, in this case cheese is the plants that would buy this milk, you think that that price is going to be higher than the price you would get as a blend price being part of the pool as grade A producer. You now have the added incentive that you won't have to fund the 38 cents, but will that be offset by, oh, well, the 4B price or the class 3 price is going to be $1 lower than the blend price for the year we think it is, 50 cents lower, so I'm not going to gain any benefit. There's other factors, but it's certainly something we need to watch. The 3 co-ops do not have grade B producers, and so we don't accept any grade B producers. I think there was one historic grade B small dairy, but going forward, we don't have any policies accepting grade B, so it would be the independents. And I don't know, but it's certainly something that I would say probably all 6 organizations want to keep a very close eye if this actually gets put in as part of federal. I don't know if that answers the question. I really don't know, but I think there's a possibility on grade B.
Yeah, it's going to depend on.
May depend on whether they hold quota too. If you're 100% quota, you're willing to pay the 38 cents because you're getting, $1.50 plus back. All right, producer handlers. Now this I don't think directly impacts anyone here, but it was a pretty major discussion point at the producer review board. There's 4 families, Producers Dairy and Foster's up here in the Modesto and Fresno, and then Hollandia and Rockview down in Southern California. These are 4 out of originally 45 producer handlers that were around in 1969 when pooling came in, and because they not only produced the milk but also distributed bottled milk products at that time, they were given a producer handler exemption on a certain volume of milk. That volume of milk has grown a couple of times, once in the 70s and once in the 90s, but since the 90s it's been a particular volume of milk. About 20 million pounds of milk per month is covered under this producer handler exemption. It's anticipated that none of these 4 families would qualify for the producer handler exemption in the federal order. Federal orders also allow you to be a producer and also distribute your product and be exempt from pool regulations, but it has nothing to do with whether you were here in 1969. It has to do with, are you bigger than 3 million pounds? Right, I should say, are you under 3 million pounds a month in class 1 distribution? Then you can be a producer handler. Are you buying milk off of other producers, or are you balancing all yourself? If you're buying milk, you cannot be a producer handler. If you're balancing yourself, you can. So those rules are written in a way that it's not anticipated any of those 4 companies or dairies would qualify as a producer handler. They're all much larger and buy milk outside of their own system. So their question in this process is, well, what happens to us? We have this exempt producer handler quota that was treated different from everybody else's. What happens? Current law actually has written this in, because I mentioned there was 45 original producer handlers, there's 4 left. The other 41 give up that exemption. That exemption was treated as quota, but treated differently than quota that any of you hold, because they were distributing milk, bottled milk back in 1969. All that would happen is to go back to quota that is treated just like anyone else has. So they hold that 20 million pounds of milk worth of exemption. That would be 20 million pounds of milk worth of quota, which I think comes out to about 50,000 pounds of solid, not fat, of quota that they would not be getting the exemption on. They would be treated just as regular quota. So that was not particularly popular. We had 2 of these dairies were represented on the producer review board. They felt that this was undervaluing the exemption that they had. but ultimately the producer review board stuck with what current law actually says, because to do anything else would require a change in law. I want to mention a couple of things related to review of the program. This was actually discussed quite a bit at the PRB as well. The first one is already in current law. The second one is new. So I'll talk about the first one, and that is, you may not have even realized it, but if 25% or more of the producers petition Secretary Ross or whoever the secretary is at that time to either amend or terminate the plan, the secretary needs to consider that and consider holding a hearing and discussing what these changes are, and if she feels that there's justification for those changes, putting it out to a vote of the producers. That provision stays. It is clear in the language that before we go to the secretary, actually any type of petition would actually go to the producer review board first, the 15 members that are on the PRB at that time, and they would review it, say, is there something here? Should we change the program? Should we terminate the program? Either of those is pondered in this language. If the decision is yes, we want to change it, or yes, we want to have producers vote on terminating it, that would then go to the secretary, who would have to decide whether to move that forward or not. Ultimately, it would go to the producers for a vote. Any change, meaningful change, not just a word here or there, but any change to the RQAs, any change to fundamentally how the program's funded, and certainly termination would require a producer vote. So none of this, while the petition opportunity exists, nothing actually changes without a producer vote. But this is already in current law. You just may never realize it. What's new is the secretary was pretty adamant that she wanted an opportunity for producers to provide feedback on the quota program on some frequency. So every 5 years, this is included in the PRB recommendations, every 5 years, the producer review board will contract with a third party and conduct a survey of all the California dairy farmers, actually all the California grade A dairy farmers who are subject to the quota program. That survey would be asking questions about the effectiveness of the program, how it's being run, are there things we should fix, or things we should tweak, all the way, probably to the most extreme, should we continue the program? The PRB would evaluate these survey results and decide, is there an overwhelming feeling of the producers to do something, and if so, let's talk about it. Let's see if there's support on the producer review board to actually make some changes to the program. PRB is under no obligation to do anything. But if the PRB decides, yes, we want to move this on to the secretary then decides, is there reason to bring this to the producers, or should I just sit on it? Yeah. Go.
Just a little correction, it's at least.
That's true. That's a good point. That was discussed. Yeah, it could be done at year one if you wanted to, but you can't go more than 5 years without one of these surveys. It's a good point. So there's, again, no obligation of the secretary. Yeah.
Rob, that being said, at least every 5 years, say after year one, and there's a group of producers, like you said, 25% could review the whole plan, but there's a group of producers that, I'll just make an example, RQAs. There's a lot of people feel that RQAs should have been eliminated and everything balanced out across the state. This would be the avenue to take to make that adjustment. Would that be a fair statement?
Well, remember, it's who initiates it. So the difference between the first one and the second one is the first one's initiated by producers, 25% or more. The second one's initiated by the producer review board. So if the producer review board felt after whatever period of time, a year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, up to 5 years, that there was enough reason to go out and survey producers and maybe have the survey even focus on RQAs as an example, because that's an issue that was even discussed during the producer review board meetings, they could do that. But if you're not on the producer review board and you can't convince the producer review board to conduct one of these surveys, then the provision 1 is open to anybody who can, put together 25% of the producers. So it's really a difference of who can drive the.
But much like today, say if enough producers request of the secretary or of members of the producer review board, hey, take a look at it just for the sake of taking a look at it. That could easily be done anytime through this whole process.
There's no, yeah, that's right. And to Joey's point, The survey's got to be held between the start of the program and the 5th year, but it could be held anytime. Again, whatever the results of the survey are, whatever the producer review board decides to do with those results, whatever the secretary decides to do with the producer review board's results, at the end of the day, nothing changes in the program without a vote of the producers. Yeah.
I'm just speaking that, Tom, that became the discussion for us sitting on the committee, more of that committee. You know, personally, after seeing this, we roll this thing out. If you carry that committee on a tweak, it'd be a great meeting, situation with RQAs, has entire hands to, as a committee, and whether we do suggestions of others, or the committee wants to make changes to a survey and this follow-up recommendation.
Yeah, that's a good point. The PRB was largely dormant, other than hardship cases, for many years. But I think the PRB is seen as a more active group under this program.
Yeah, always used to be.
All right, now we talked about a couple of votes. We talked about the vote you're going through right now and any future votes. These are the rules, and they're written into law, of how any future vote will be held, as well as the vote we're going through right now. First, you need a quorum. So you need at least 51% of the ballots that are sent out to be returned with either a yes or a no to make it a legal vote. So there were 1,054 ballots sent in, and somewhere in the range of 540 votes need to come back with either a yes or a no. Now, you have 1,054, maybe lower than what you anticipated, because there's probably about 1,300 or so dairy farms, actual farms left in the state. This is one producer, one vote, unless you have separated your dairy. If you own multiple dairies and you've separated them into different legal entities. So one is Corporation A, two is Corporation B, or one is a partnership, and two is a different partnership. One is sole proprietorship, the other is a partnership, etc. So it's going to be one entity per, one vote per entity, but it comes out to 1,054 from CDFA's database. Assuming we meet that 51% threshold and it's a legal vote, then it goes to only looking at the votes that were cast and submitted. We need 65% of those votes to be a yes, as long as that represents 51% of the milk that votes. You'll note on the ballot, they have actually the volume of milk that each producer, that your producer, or either your dairy or your group of dairies, if you're under the same ownership, collectively produce. And that's not because CDFA doesn't know how much milk you produce. It's actually because it's for verification, so that they know that this ballot matches the dairy that they have in the system. But it's a good reminder that it's not just your vote, but it's how much milk you represent, because you've got to hit both. 65% of the producers that vote, representing 51% or more of the milk that votes, or theoretically, if you don't hit 65% of the producers, but you're over 51% of the producers, and they're really large producers, and it's over 65% of the milk, you could theoretically pass it that way. But I think most likely you're looking at the first scenario. Basically, in our heads, simplify this, we need 2/3 of the votes that are cast to be a yes, and that would make it a legal vote, a yes vote, assuming you hit the 51% of total votes come back. It's kind of a confusing way of voting. The idea is to get enough participation, that's the quorum part, make sure it's a healthy representation of the producers, and then of the producers who vote, it's making sure that there's pretty overwhelming support for moving forward with this Quota Implementation Plan or any future changes as talked about in the review section. So is there any questions on this vote? Basically, we need to get a lot of votes in, and there needs to be a lot of yeses if we want to see this pass. All right, so I mentioned all 6 organizations are supporting a yes vote on this. It really comes down to presents in the larger scheme of things. We've got a federal order coming down the pike. There's going to be lots of discussion about that federal order, pros, cons, potential impact, where does that take us? But in the meantime, this quota piece, from the very beginning, the 3 co-ops who submitted the original petition made it very clear in the language that they had written to USDA that we are interested in looking at a federal order, but it's got to have a path forward for quota. And we had hoped that USDA would fund that quota program out of the pool. I mentioned before why they couldn't, but Now that we know they can't, we've got to have an accommodation to continue the state-run program in a different form because it can't be part of the federal order intimately out of the pool. So this quota implementation plan is that accommodation. It solves that $12 million a month math problem. And really, there's no reasonable alternative. I mean, the producer review board discussed a lot of issues on how to tinker on the edges, but the bottom line is you got to get the $12 million a month from somewhere. It's producer funded now. It would have to be producer funded then. How do you do that if you don't have a pool? And so, really, the idea of a deduction, while that has caused some interesting discussion around the industry, what's going to happen with this deduction? It's really the only way to collect the monies needed. I wish there was a magical pot of $12 million a month out there we could tap, but there's not. So there's really no downside to a yes vote. The yes vote doesn't put us into the system unless a California federal order is voted on. And so we are strongly encouraging our members to consider a yes vote in order to keep this process moving forward, or to keep that discussion alive on a California federal order next year when we have the final language from USDA. So with that, that concludes the presentation. And if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer, or any of the other 2 co-ops and 3 trade associations could obviously jump in.
Not considered repeating questions.
And we'll repeat the questions we get. And please, DFA, LOL, Western, MPC, CDC, with me jump in.
Do you know what the assessment was, the average assessment in 2000?
I don't offhand. Actually, CDFA put those figures together.
The question was, do we know what the average assessment was in 2014?
2014 being the peak year in production, and therefore the most amount of milk that we would be spreading that cost along. I don't remember offhand. I don't know if any of you do. I'm gonna take the easy way out. It would have been lower, but
right. Yeah, and the reason I bring that up is obviously the review board is going to be a very important part of this puzzle. But if you don't want to wedge be driven between those who have and those who have not, it seems to me that they would have fixed the assessment. But that's just my personal point of view. Obviously, the 12 million wouldn't always be there. But you could look at it from those that don't have quota, they're going to receive less money because those that have are guaranteed.
Yeah, and I don't know if folks on the live stream could hear that, but it's discussing those who don't own quota and the fact that this is a cost on their milk statement that will go up and down, but as milk shrinks, it will go higher. We know that. I don't think 2014 it would have been so dramatically lower that it would have been in the 20s. I think it would have been in that 33, 32 cents as opposed to 34 cents in the spring, and so in summer it'd be a little bit higher. The problem is with fixing an assessment is you identify. The quota has been a commitment that if you own that quota, you're paid on that quota. And I guess my only response to a non-quota holder who says, hey, this cost is going up and up, and I don't like to see that, is that cost is going up and up today under the current program. They just don't see it. But the cost of funding the quota program out of the pool has been the same $12 million a month, whether that pool included 3.5 billion pounds in April of 2014, or 3.3 billion pounds in April of this year, or 3.1 billion pounds in August of this year. So it doesn't change the math, but I agree with you that there's certainly more transparency to it, and that will create some interesting discussions down the road.
Exactly, and I think the producer review board is that key for the RQAs, for the rate assessment, for grade B, for these issues. Hopefully, are going to have a hard job.
I think we came out of that. That's probably the beauty thing about it. The greatest experience. During the month, we talked about, we got hung up on that, talking about section. We didn't want to do anything to jeopardize COVID. But it's an animal we're going to have to tackle down the road anyway. And this actually, to me, sets up the vehicle to do that. There was a suggestion by a member last week that when we did this or not, we should go to this anyway. and make, whether in our California system, do a standalone to really then address voter awareness, you know, we get that, it creates transparency that I know in my minds.
Just to be clear though, the language is written in a way that it only triggers in under federal law. So that may be an idea somebody had. What you're voting on would only go into effect. And the question we're going to ask next year, when this federal water language comes out, hopefully, and we have a chance to vote on it, is everybody better? And that's the whole reason you do that. If we don't think that every producer is going to be better off in a federal order, we shouldn't be considering a federal order. And that's been the whole process in the past several years. So we're going to have that discussion, which will get beyond the haves and have-nots, so to speak, on the quota issue.
Yeah, I don't want to be a one-note Charlie here, but I'm doing it. There's people that feel like this is their only opportunity for voice based on co-ops doing a block. But the one that didn't think co-ops were going to work the way you want, you might vote against it. Have you guys come across that? Because it's been expressed to me.
So the question for those on the live stream is the idea that, or the comment in previous meetings that this is viewed by some who are opposed to a cooperative block vote, or opposed to where they think their cooperative might block vote, that this would be their one chance to vote individually and potentially vote no, so that's their chance to vote no long term.
Or non-cooperative.
Or non-cooperative members, but non-cooperative members they don't worry about the block vote side, because non-cooperative members would vote individually. You know, I do not know what goes on in the minds of 1,048 individual voting dairy farmers. So if that mentality is out there, I'm very glad, as someone who works for a cooperative, as you know, those of us who are working for the 3 co-ops, 3 trade associations that are asking to support this. I mean, I want to see a yes vote. I think that a yes vote is the best opportunity for this industry to continue the discussion that could be resulting in more money. Having said that, I'm very glad we don't need 100%, because we'll never get 100% of producers, because we basically get 1/3 of them can have ideas like that and vote how they believe. Because I frankly, while the 3 co-ops have the option to block vote and may decide to do that, but certainly haven't announced that, that decision is being driven by a board of directors of dairy farmers who's elected by their dairy farmers. So it's not that myself or our executives or management teams are making that decision. It's the board of directors. So if a block vote is made, it's made by the board of directors on behalf of the membership. If it's not made, well, then it goes directly to the membership. And I don't think that any of these boards are going to want to make that decision without also getting a pulse of where their members are. I don't want to speak for any of the other co-ops, but I know that, on behalf of CDI, our board has said, at a minimum, we're going to conduct our own internal vote of our membership to know where they're at. So if somebody's going to vote no because they're so worried about a block vote that they'd rather kill the process altogether, I don't know what to say to them other than I hope you reconsider. But I would say that I don't think co-op or non-co-op, you're not going to have a voice next year. Your voice just may be expressed, if you're in a block voting cooperative, expressed with all of your fellow dairy farmers, similar to how I voted for Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton got all of California's electoral votes last year. That's possible in a block voting scenario. I guess I just exposed who I voted for, in case you guys weren't quite sure.
Well, I really have a hard time thinking. First, I don't think a block vote's mandatory. So
it's not.
Directors can opt different ways. But as a director of a co-op representatives in California, the direction that currently is in favor of a better future for your members, or the vast majority of them, in the long term. So I would have to discuss it with a member that has a different opinion of
why he has that opinion, because I can't see the board of directors obviously doing it for personal insight or personal goals, so it doesn't make sense. So I'm okay with block voting. Each co-op's going to do their own thing, and we're going to get there. But we need the opportunity. I agree with you. This has to pass. Otherwise, we're going to go back to dealing with Karen Ross and dealing with the unknown outcomes of different hearings.
Yeah, well, we're gonna have lots of discussion about the federal order next year and whether that's the direction we want to go. Obviously, the co-ops have invested a lot of resources into that process. The trade groups have invested a lot of time, resources, and energy as well. We want to see that process through and see if it's the benefit of producers. But if we don't get a yes vote here, we probably don't have that legitimate option next year. I mean, it's very difficult to see a path for federal order. Quota doesn't have a path forward. But yeah, I've heard from some of those same producers, Frank, and I've talked to them, and I don't know if I've had any influence, but I hope they're in a small minority. Any other questions? All right. Well, if not, thank you guys for coming. I don't know if you had any additional comments on that. Obviously, we're all available for follow-up questions and discussions, and I think some of the other groups are also continuing to hold member meetings. So I try to get all mine out of the way so I can enjoy November. But yeah, hopefully we've been able to answer your question. You know, it's hit and miss.
The question for those on the live stream is how the participation has been statewide for some of these discussions.
We had we scheduled 15 of our meetings, and we had 200 of our own members come, and then some allied industry people that came. You know, that's about half of our membership. So I would like to see more, but I was glad that we get that. We also had a membership meeting back to that. So some folks came to our membership meeting where, you know, we have a fall meeting, so it's, it wasn't the focal point of the meeting. We talked about a lot of other things that it was mentioned. It's going to be in our newsletter, I'm sure, between now and the end. It's been in our newsletter as, you know, everybody. So I think every producer is retooled differently. Some of them don't want to come to a meeting. Some would rather read it. Some would rather talk about it with their buddies. And so all those 200 limited ours, and those limited others are also talking to 2 or 3 other people. I'm confident that it's all positive. We're heading in the right direction. But I certainly would like to see as much participation as needed to get folks that need.
It's been surprising that it's not been more fervor that was present in April to maintain the political. So they're either extremely confident in what they're doing or
I'll just comment that I think a lot of people aren't here because they're already convinced, hey, we're going to vote yes on this to deal with it later on. So they're just convinced that why should we go to a meeting when we've already voted yes, when we're going to vote yes. I'm being a little optimistic there as well. So.
I'll second that.
Well, this live stream will be available in perpetuity on the WUD YouTube station, so you can see this one. You can also see the one that we did in Modesto. Western United will be in Petaluma tomorrow, where we have gotten an incredibly high number of RSVPs from that area. We'll see what the outcome is, but that is a crowd that certainly their viewpoints are important, and we'll hopefully get some of these questions answered there. So, but all of us are available for lots of comments and questions. If you want to take a look at some of this stuff a little bit more closely, looking at numbers, I'll offer Amy at PDF. She's our economist, but Rob's always a really good resource. There's a lot of really good resources within your trade groups and your cooperatives that can help you with some real numbers. So I've been very proud of the effort that we've had. We've got a lot of really intense conversations, but I think ultimately moving forward together has been the best and most logical. With that, any other questions? Okay, thank you everyone on the live stream. I'm going to go ahead and end the broadcast, and there's lots of donuts and coffee.
Still haven't made it to your office.
I forgot to bring it.